it's like changing a tire, right? There's a lot of little tricks and stuff to learn. So it's very cool that Jack's going to go through all this.
All right, first thing I'm going to talk about is, I get it all the time, is when do I know it's time to change my strings? And if you can't remember the last time they were changed, they probably need to be done. But I'm going to give you a couple little quick little things that I use. One, if you take a hold of your guitar and you just take your fingers and you run them up and down one of the unwound strings, just hold the string tight, run it up and down, and then look at your fingers. And if you got any kind of gunge or rust or anything like that on there, change your strings. Something that a lot of guys do is they'll pull their old strings off and then they'll save them in case they pop a string. Do yourself a favor, throw them away. They're not worth holding on to. They're garbage at that point. So if you think you need your strings changed, one, if it won't stay in tune anymore and they're rusting up and they're getting all messy and kind of corroded, change them. Couple of reasons. One, your guitar will stay in tune better. You won't have any issues. It will sound good. The intonation will stay in good. And the other thing is you're not going to chew your frets all to pieces because your fret wire will get chewed up from rust because rust travels around and it will just gnaw at that fret until you got a big rut in your fret, and then you start fretting out, and it's an ugly, ugly scene. And I don't do fret jobs, so you'll have to take that to someone else. I'm not a luthier. I do minor repairs and string changes and things like that, but I learned a lot of tricks from the luthiers. So I'm going to tell you what they told me. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change my view here so you can see more of my hands and not my face, because no one needs to see my face. So I'm just going to move it down here, hopefully. And what I've done is I've set up my dining room table. And all I got is a towel on the table here. And in my shop, I've got a nice little neck support that holds the guitars in place. Obviously at home, I don't have that, and you guys probably wouldn't either. So here's what I'm going to do is I took some of Morgan's books, and I just made a little pile of books, and I just throw my towel over that. And I put a towel down on the table because when you're doing any kind of cleanup, a lot of times you'll get little ends of strings or you'll get filings and things like that. And the last thing you want to do is scratch your guitar all up or scratch your table all up or one or the other. So I just kind of set it up, towel on the table, a couple of books for a neck support, and now you've got a nice little place to work. So something else that I get is, what gauge of strings do I need? And string gauges go by the first string, which is the littlest one. So on certain guitars, like if you're a Strat player, usually it's a 9-gauge string, which real thin. I play a Strat, I play a Les Paul, so I use different ones for different guitars. My Les Paul, I use 10-gauge, so that's a 10 to a 46 that I like. And that's just the thickness in thousandths of the gauge string. My acoustic, I have a full-size Dreadnought, so that's just a standard size guitar. And factory, they come usually with a 12-gauge string. If you have a 3/4, you might want to go with a lighter gauge. If you have a folk model, same thing. For a 3/4, I would run like a 10-gauge string. For a folk, maybe an 11. But to go with a full heavy string on that light of a guitar, you can do a lot of damage. You can pull your bridge off. You can do some other things to it that you just don't want to do. And the heavier the string, of course, the harder it is to play. So if you've been playing for a while, you can probably handle a heavy gauge. But if you're a newbie, you haven't been playing very long, it's going to hurt your fingers if you got a real heavy gauge string. So I don't suggest going any heavier than a 12 on an acoustic, unless you're a drop tuner that you like to tune your guitar down low. In that case, if you go with a heavier gauge and you're drop tuning, you're not putting as much tension on it, and it's okay. So I'm going to get right into it here, because I'm going to go through a bunch of different things here. I got a couple of electrics. I've got a bass, and I'm going to do a full string change on my acoustic so you can see all the little tips and things that I do on my acoustic. But if you're like Spencer and you're home practicing and you get into that crazy David Gilmour solo and you're bending and you're going crazy and all of a sudden your string pops, well, you can't take it into the store right now to get it fixed. So I'm going to start, I think, with my Strat. So this right here, whoop, is my Strat. I don't know if you can, if I stand back here, you got to see what I mean by Strat, standard Strat style guitar. This is an old Phoenix from the 80s. It's not actually a Fender. I just looked it up today to see what it actually was. And I got a date on it and stuff, which was kind of cool. So like I said, you're playing away, and all of a sudden, you know, bang, you blow a string, and now you're in trouble. You can't play with a broken string.
I wanted to do that job.
First thing, I pulled that off the machine head just to get it out of my way. Just unwrapped it. So get rid of that old string. It's done. And something about Strats that's pretty cool is at this end, you get it goes down through and through the back of the body. And what is behind there, I took the whole cap off so you can see it. You know, if I move it down, you can see back in there, this is a tremolo that comes on almost every standard Strat. Okay, so unless you got like a Floyd Rose or something fancy, this is pretty much your standard Strat style. And the strings actually feed through the back, through that little block there. Now Telecasters feed through the back as well, but they go straight through the body. They don't have a block. This is for the trem, that's why the springs are there. And what happens is I blew the third string off it, which is this one right here. And what happens a lot of times is the string will get stuck in there. And you push and you push and you push on the other side and nothing happens. You can't get it out of there. So this was a big problem years ago when I was learning how to do this. And nowadays, I don't know if you can see that, if it's pretty small, that's a little tiny Allen key. It's actually made for setting the height adjustment on the bridge saddles. But that fits down through the hole on this side. And I just give that a little push, and my string now will come right out. So if it jams up on you, that's my trick. But before I knew how to do it with an Allen key, I used to do this. I would take a paper clip and I would literally straighten out a paper clip like that and ram that down because it fits right down through the hole just as good. And that'll help pry that out of there. So first tool that you're gonna need if you're a Strat player is get yourself a paper clip. Real high tech, you know, very expensive. You gotta really go out and shop for one of these. You want a big, heavy duty paper clip because you don't want it to be wussy. And throw that right in your guitar case because if you're out on a gig and you blow a string and it gets stuck in there, it's a pain in the butt to get out. So some Strats have one of these on the back that has the holes in the back, which you can usually feed a string down through. But if I'm doing a full change, I pull that right off just to get it out of my way. 6 little screws around the outside. And all that does is just get it out of my way so I can get down through that block. So back to here again. So now I got my string out of there. So now I got to feed the new one through. So let me grab my new string. I'm putting on a 17, which is the gauge that I'm running on this guitar. It's the 3rd string for this guitar. So I get that all unwound. And the one thing I really want to do is make sure that I don't crimp or bend this string in any way, because if you do that, you get a kink in it, that's where it will break. So in the back here, I'm going to feed that down through the empty hole. Guess I should put my glasses on so I can see what I'm doing. And on the other side, it's coming up through, and what I want to make sure is that it's going through where it's supposed to go through in the saddle. so that it's definitely going in the right direction. And I pull that through, give it a good tug, make sure it's locked in. And I'm done with that end. So at the opposite end, I'll flip this up so you can see it. Most Strats have these little hold downs. And they're actually called string trees. And what that does is it brings the string down because of the shape of the headstock. It has a loop to it, and it kind of arches down. So you want the string to go down once it crosses the nut, to go down this way towards the back of the guitar. And what that stops is chatter in here. So if you get that rattly string, usually it's because it's chattering in the bridge. So as I go over top through the nut, I get it in a little slot here. I slip it under that string tree, and it arches that down so that the string tree holds it down, and this arches down instead of going straight across. So usually when I go to put these in, I wait and I do that later. I just slip it under before I get it all good and tight. Now, all your machine heads have a little hole in there. So you're going to go ahead and feed through that little slot, or through the little hole. There we go. And then again, you want to be real sure that you're not kinking up that string, because if you put a crimp in it, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. So you want to leave some excess on this end. We're going to do this a few times so you'll see how I do it. Make sure that this is a 6 inline configuration. Make sure that your string is on the inside. So in other words, pointing backwards, so that when I start wrapping this, it's going to wrap to the bottom side, not over the top. If you're going over the top, then you're going backwards. Think of when you're holding your guitar, you want to tune it up, you're turning away from yourself. That's to get the proper wrap on the string. What I like to do is to make sure I get at least a couple of times around on that machine head. If you don't get a couple times around, the string can't lock itself in place. And it locking itself in place, it creates that non-slip situation. If it slips, you're going to keep consistently going out of tune, non-stop. It will just keep slipping and slipping. And if you don't put enough through, once you cut this excess off, it'll end up sliding right out, and then you're done. You got to put another string on. So I'm going to do this without my winder for a minute. I like to put my whole hand underneath that string. And I put my thumb down just to keep the tension, because I don't want to kink the string. I take this end and I give a little bend, so it locks it in place. And I start to turn. As I go around, my string, my excess of the string comes back to the new one. And the first time I go around, I go over the top of that excess. Then I'll push it down for the rest of the way. Like I said, you want to get at least 2 times around. First time over, and the rest of them under the excess of the string. And you just keep going until she starts to tighten up, keeping the excess out of the way. Always make sure you never overlap yourself. If that string overlaps itself, it will cut right through it. And then you're replacing it again.
So Jack, can you just turn it the other way, so that, like, if you do overlap it, can you just turn it the other way?
Yeah, you can push it down so that it undoes itself.
Oh, okay.
But you really want it to just kind of go down in nice even layers as you go down. And if you're going the wrong way, same thing. you can turn it around, go the other way.
I just know that like when I learned how to do this, overlapping is easy to do. So
Very easy, yeah. So you want to keep a close eye on it, that it's winding down the machine head, because just like a string tree, the lower it is, the better it is for chatter on the other end. So as I'm starting to get tightened up here, I just keep giving a little tug. And the first time I tugged on it, it actually popped at the opposite end. And what that was it was sliding up into the block and locking itself in place. So I'm always keeping tension with my left hand. The reason being, like I said, you don't want to kink. It's a two-hand job. At that point, you can grab your tuner. If you don't have a tuner, you can do the fret 5 thing. I like to stick tuner on and make sure that, okay. Now it's a G again. Once I got it in tune, I'll continue doing that. I'll give it a little tug. I'm not going to try and lift my guitar up by the string or anything. I'm just going to give it a tug and just make sure it's seated both in the block at the other end, and it's locked in good on that machine head. And again, it's gone flat. I'll just keep tugging it. Until it stays in tune. Now at that point, see this little piece I got left? I don't know, Morgan, am I frozen here?
yes, yes, you are. I think
Morgan's. Here's the other tool. Here's the other tool that I need. That's a pair of side cutters. You can also use, anything, pair of pliers, needle nose pliers, anything that's got an edge to them. I've used scissors on the little strings and hack my way through them. But one of my biggest pet peeves are people who leave these ends just kind of floating out there, because they're messy, but 2, they're going to put an eye out if you play in a band. So you want to get rid of that. So I just give a little clip and take that off, and that guitar is all done. It's ready to rock and roll again. And that's the Strat. All right, so I'm going to do the same thing on a different type of guitar. This is my old Les Paul. This is my old girl. She's an 87 Les Paul Studio. I call it my weapon of choice. This is the guitar I've been playing since 1987. You can see it's got a little road rash on her. She's well worn and definitely been a really good tool over the years. But again, I still pop strings on that one too. So we're going to go ahead and, again, you're doing that big David Gilmour solo, and you get way too into it, and you hit that big E chord, and that 6th string pops. Now you're in trouble. So you got to fix this, and you got to fix it fast because you're on a gig. So on a Les Paul, it actually is a much easier fix. Because you have down at this end, you have a tailpiece. And all the string does is slide out of that tailpiece. Nothing else has to really change. Everything else is already stays in position. And all I got to do is just pop out a new string, and I slide it through the tailpiece. Up and over the bridge, and make sure that it's in the saddle. And by saddle, I mean this little piece here with the groove in it. So the string lays right in the saddle, locks in place. Don't have to go through the back or anything fancy like that. And now you're ready to come up to this other end here. This works the same way, but it's a little different configuration. Unlike the Strat, this one's got what they call a 3 and 3 configuration. So it's 3 on the top, 3 on the bottom. And again, I'm just going to put that string through the hole in the machine head. And I'm going to give myself enough slack. Like I said, I like to put my hand under it like that. I know I've got 4 fingers underneath it, and it's just kind of snug against those 4 fingers. And I bend it over so that it can't possibly get pulled out. Now this is my other little tool. If you don't have one of these, I suggest you pick one up for the great cost of like $2.99 or whatever they cost. This will speed things up immensely in your life. And all that does is, you can see this end here, if I move it the right way, is just shaped to go over top of your machine head. And it just sits over like that. And what this is a speed winder. So now, keeping my tension on the other side, I can use that speed winder to go around about 5 times faster. And I can keep that tension on and make sure that I'm wrapping down on the machine head, round and round. Again, till I'm tight. So now I'm going to give it a tug, lock it in place. Do the same thing a couple of times. And I check that on the tuner, make sure that it's all right. And I'm going to take my end again, because I don't want to leave this this big ugly string bouncing around. And I'm going to cut it off, so I don't put an eye out. Quick and easy. So I like my Les Paul. It takes me no time at all to fix it. Now, for me, having that tailpiece in bridge assembly, it's really, really nice to have that for changing a single string. It's so much quicker. But if you do take them all off, if you're going to clean up your guitar and take all those strings off, be careful to watch this bridge and watch these little pinwheels here. What that is for setting up your height adjustment. And if you accidentally move them up or down, your action is going to change. Your height action is going to change. If your tailpiece moves up and down, you might get your chatter in the bridge across the saddles. So you want to make sure not to move that around too much when you take everything off. I know a lot of times you want to take it all off and clean it all up and get rid of all the dust and everything. If you want a quick, easy way, get yourself a clean paintbrush. Give it one of those. All the dust is gone. That's how I do it. Quick and easy. So that's my reasoning for playing a Les Paul. Is it's just really, really fast to change a single string on. And you can be back in business, no time flat. Okay? Now my Les Paul, I use a 10 gauge string. My Strat, I use a 9 gauge string. I generally, I don't know, for some reason I leaned towards D'Addario strings. I get a lot of, what's the best kind of string? I started using D'Addarios years ago because I was told there's more nickel in those and they don't chew your frets up. This is an 87, it's got some fret wear, but not nearly as bad as it would be with cheap strings. So I like the tone of them, so I've stuck with those for years. It's just my personal preference. Everybody's got their personal preference. You got to try a bunch of different brands before you find out what you really like, I guess. But that's what I like. So one more single change I'm going to do, and then I'm going to get into the craziness.
Jack, can you move the iPad down so you've moved it up a little bit?
All right, sorry. Yeah, I will fix that. I got to fix my books here while I'm at it.
My books.
Yeah, I'm used to a string, a neck cradle that holds them in place. Yeah, the other thing I have here, this is my old 71 Ripper. So I'm going to do a quick bass string. Now, this one here, I'll move it down a little bit so you can see. This one here, this is more like a Telecaster. You see again the wear in the back of this thing. And the strings actually go through the back. There's little ferrules that go through the back, and the strings feed right through the back compartment there. And then just up and over the bridge at the back. Pretty easy to figure out how all that works on a bass. Some of them go right into the bridge. You'll see where the hole is. It's up at the other end that it gets tricky. This thing's very, very long. So up at the other end, bass machine heads are a little bit different. Some of them have a hole through them, but 90% of them do not. Usually what they have is a slot, and the slot goes right from this side to that side, right straight across. If I lift it up, maybe you can see that. So there's no real hole to put the string through. Instead, straight down the middle, there's a hole at the bottom. And what you do is, if you look at the string there, again, I measured it out, the width of my hand. This is tricky, I'll move this over this way. The width of my hand, this way. So the end of the string is right here. To make sure I had enough slack, because now you can't feed it through and trim it off when you're done. So you got to make sure you got enough before you even start. So I make sure it's over my saddle on the other end, and I'm going to go straight down like that, and do the same thing. Loop it around the outside. Hold it tight with my other hand, and I start wrapping. The only difference on these is I don't go over and under. I go straight down, making sure I don't overlap. I just keep wrapping until the string comes up tight, and all that tension's out from underneath my fingers on the other side, holding it tight over here with this hand. The tension so you don't kink it. You do not want to kink your string, or now you're in a big world of mess. And same thing, tune it up. Keep giving it a stretch, making sure that it's locked in place. When you can stretch a little bit and it stays in tune, it probably will stay in tune for a while anyway. Now I've heard guys ask me, okay, I play bass, how often do I change my bass strings? Well, bass strings last a lot longer than guitar strings. This one here, I've gone over a year without changing my strings. Not saying that's a good idea, it's just mostly because I don't play a lot of bass. The big whines in a bass string will fill up with all kinds of crud from your fingers, especially if you're a sweater when you play. If you sweat a lot when you play and your hands get wet, all that's getting on your strings. And these big ruts that the bass strings have will just collect all that. If your bass sits out and it's not in a case all the time, well, moisture and dust are not your friend, and they will get all in there. And what it will do is just kill the sound of the strings, and they'll just start sounding like a dead thump. And at that point, change them. I know bass strings are about 3 times the price of a set of guitar strings, but you're going to do it once a year as opposed to every couple of months. I've heard of guys boiling their bass strings in baking soda, dipping them in CLR, doing all kinds of things to clean them all up. And yeah, you could do that. Friends of mine have done that. It does work, but all they're good for is spares, just in case you pop one. Other than that, spend the money, buy a set of strings. You'll thank me in the end. So bass string's really no different than a guitar string. As long as you keep that tension and make sure you do not overlap your wrap on the other end, you should be fine. All right. So, a couple little tricks there. At this point, we haven't used a whole lot of tools. We've used our fancy paper clip, our high-tech paper clip, our little string winder here, and a little set of side cutters, which, like I said, pair of pliers, and we'll cut a wire, we'll cut a string. Now I'm going to get a little more in depth. And no questions so far, Morgan? Nobody's asked anything?
Nope.
Okay.
If anybody has any questions, just unmute yourself or type it into the chat.
Okay. What I'm going to do at this point, because I have, I don't know how many guitars in this house right now. I don't have everything. I don't have a Bigsby. I don't have a Floyd Rose or a Kaler floating trim. I don't have a 12 string, and I don't have a classical. They're not something I have in the house. And to get into all of those, it would take me a long, long time. So what I am going to do is, a lot of people have an acoustic. Usually if you got an electric, you probably got an acoustic laying around the house somewhere too. Some people, that's all they play. And acoustics can be a little bit tricky. There's a few more little things that you got to remember with these. So I'm going to do my Martin, and whether it needs it or not, I don't know. I can't really remember the last time I changed the strings, so I probably need strings, right? If you can't remember, you probably need to change them. So let me grab this. So this is my new Martin. Yay! I'll bring this back down. So that's my girl there. So it's a 3-and-3 on the headstock, which most of them are. And it's got a standard bridge on it. And what I mean by standard is it's got the little pegs across here. Some acoustics don't have pegs. They just feed in through the back like a Les Paul does. Feeds right through the back of the bridge and just up and over the bridge bone here. But most that I ever have to do have these little pegs. Now these are a pain. This is where it gets a little tricky on an acoustic. So first thing I'm going to do, don't waste time. You can sit and you can unwind each string individually, or you can take your side cutters and get them out of your way. I can't be bothered. I don't save my old strings. But all they're good for is taking windshields out of cars. And I'm going to pull all these off the machine heads and get rid of those. Now, that gets all that out of the way on one end. Let's spin it around. Now we got all this mess at the other end. So at this end, let me get my books out of the way here because I don't need them for a second. At this end, we have all the white pegs. Now, you can use your side cutters and very gently take a hold of that peg and just wiggle it out and pull the string through. The other cool thing is on a string winder, on these little gizmos, you see the little U shape. What that little U shape for is to get underneath the peg. It pops it right out. Just like that. Try to lose your little pegs. So these are the little tricky things. They're called bridge pins. And I don't know if you can see it or not, but they have a little slot that runs up there. They're tapered, and it's just a big ball end on the top. And that's all it holds the string in the bridge, in the holes. Okay? Now, this piece right here, that's the bridge bone, and it can fall out. So once you take all those strings off, all that's holding that thing in there is gravity. The strings hold it down, and that's it. So at this point, it's just floating there. So be careful if you flip your guitar over or move it around, you want to polish it all up. I get it, everybody wants a shiny guitar, but watch that doesn't fall out. And if it does fall out, make sure you don't get it backwards. Some of them have little tapers on the third string or second string. That's for intonation. If they're in the wrong spot, then your guitar will not stay in tune. So now that I've got it, all the strings off, I'm gonna look at my neck. And if I look at that, I got a little bit of crud on there. And that's, again, I hang this on the wall in my house. So a little bit of humidity and a little bit of dust. And then I play it and I ram that all onto the fretboard. So what I like to do, if it's real bad, is I take one of these. Now what that is a one-sided razor blade. I don't suggest using one of these unless it's really bad. And all I do, I'll see if I can do this sideways so you can see me. All I do is very gently scrape across the neck. And all that does is take off some of that crap that's built up on the neck. Now, unless it's really bad, I don't suggest that you do that. And if you do, be very careful, because you don't want to gouge into that fretboard. You can make a real mess of it. Otherwise, the other thing is your frets. Now your fret wire here, if you've left your strings go too long, or it's been sitting out, it's humid and damp, cheaper fret wire is bad as well, that it will rust up. And you get a lot of tarnish and corrosion. Now, if you're like me and you like to bend a string once in a while, you'll hear it actually click underneath. So what I use is a little bit of steel wool, and again, very gently. If you dig in with that steel wool, what you're doing is you're marring up your fretboard and making a mess. So all I do is I start at the top, and I very gently run the steel wool over my fret until it gets shiny. Just to polish those frets. Rust can travel. So if your frets are rusty and you put new strings on, guess what? A couple days and your strings are rusty too. So I just clean them all up and I go all the way down, just a quick little buff. You don't have to dig in, you don't have to get too crazy or silly. Just clean them up so they're shiny. I can actually see I got a little bit of tarnish on these ones. And it's mostly because I haven't been playing it, the poor thing that's been hanging on the wall and getting ignored. So at that point, they're all nice and shiny again. And you can use a cloth, you can use anything. I use a paintbrush. This is just a clean paintbrush, never been used. Because you get a little bit of these filings and you don't want them anywhere on your guitar. So I just run the paintbrush up and down. It also lets you get all that dust out from underneath where the strings are, and you can't get cloth in there to polish it up. This is when you get to clean it. Up at the headstock here, underneath all the strings, you can dust all that off. Look, I can see the name of it again. And all that. So that's always a good thing. Give it a good polish. And then I use this. And everybody says, what the heck is that? I know what it looks like. It's not, it's lemon oil. So I do a little bit of lemon oil. Now, when I put this on, I don't spray it down the neck. I use about 3 drops, and that's it. And what I forgot, one sec. Is a paper towel. So all I do, I just fold up my paper towel, and I just rub this in so that it just kind of makes the whole fretboard kind of wet. And then I run it up and down just like I was polishing the frets. Run it up and down on the fretboard itself. And what I'm doing is cleaning all the gunk out of there that gets on the fretboard. And you can tell how bad it was by what it looks like when you're done. What that is dust and sweat and crap that has just been floating around the air and has been stuck to the neck of your guitar. And then you're picking that thing up and playing with it. That's disgusting. So if you don't want like goop on your hands, clean it up. And I just like to make sure it's good and dry. Once it's all good and dry, you're all good. My neck is done. Frets are polished. Fretboard is polished. One more thing I like to do on an acoustic is my machine heads. When I do a full string change on any guitar, I do the machine heads. Some of them have a little insert that just pushes down, but this one, as you can see, has a little nut around the top here. And right now, I'm actually turning those by hand. That's how loose they are. So, little 10mm wrench. And I'm just going to snug those. I don't crank them up tight. I just give them a little snug. And what that does is locks it in there so that it can't spin or move to throw you out of tune. The last thing you want to be doing is tuning your guitar every 30 seconds. So just make sure they're snug. And if you look right in the end here, if you can see it, in these machine heads and a lot of the newer ones, a little screw in there. So again, I don't crank it tight. I just make sure that it's snug. If you crank it too tight, you won't be able to turn the peg. I just like to make sure they're snug. And again, it's to prevent slipping, because you don't want these to slip while you're playing. At that point, give them a jiggle. Make sure there's no movement. Sometimes even these little back screws get loose. You want to make sure that nothing's loose or rattling around on you. Yeah, they're all pretty good. And look what I did. I knocked my bridge bone out. So that's all it takes. You move it around a little bit. Oh, that's gone. Now what do I do? Luckily, I found mine. I can put it back where it's supposed to go. And I noted which way it goes. So that's back in place. All right. We're all cleaned up and shiny, and I dusted her all off. If you want to polish it up, you can get some polish. Just some cleaner spray. I got a matte finish, so I don't use a lot of that stuff on this particular guitar. But if you got a shiny guitar and you want to keep it shiny, any kind of cleaner spray like that. They make all kinds of stuff on the market for cleaning and polishing your guitar. I think most of it is kind of like Lemon Pledge, but I'm not really sure. And I'm going to go back to my books so I can hold my headstock up. going to start at the other end. Now at this end, again, I like my D'Addario strings. I'm just a fanatic over these things. Just personal preference, it's just what I like. These are 12 gauge, EJ11. They are a 12 to 53 light gauge string. Phosphor bronze or 80-20 bronze, doesn't matter, it's what you like. I've heard of cryogenic strings. I don't know what the difference is with those things other than they were flash frozen. I don't know how that makes them sound better, but something else I like about these packages is, I don't even know if you can see it, but on the back of the package, they color code the ball end of the string so you can't screw them up. I love that because it's come in handy a few times in the dark. You're trying to figure out which string you need and you're trying to pull it out of your case in a hurry. And it actually says, okay, my first string's silver, my second string's purple, my third string's green. So you don't screw them up. If you go in the right order, you can't possibly mess them up. And so when I do an acoustic or electric, any guitar, I like to start at my heaviest string. I don't know why, it's just a habit. So I unwind them. They're always in this big coil. And again, be careful not to bend them. Now here's the trick. This is the tricky part. And this is when people tell me, I need new bridge pins. What happened? Well, I was restringing my guitar and I shot it across the room. So this can happen. I'm going to show you the trick of how it doesn't happen to me very often. Still does once in a while, but not very often. So ball end of the string goes down in the hole. And I put it down there far enough that I know it's in there. This little slot on here faces the string from the back. So the slot's facing the sound hole, which means the string can ride in that slot. I push that pin down and I tug it. If that thing pops right back out, it's not locked in place. So I can give it a good solid tug and it's wedged in there tight. That's all it's holding in there is that little wedge. Holds the string in place. So again, back to my other end. There we go. Yeah, that'll work. My handy dandy string winder. And I want to start from the inside, which means down the middle here. And work my way out so that I know it's going to feed onto the machine head the proper direction. About the width of my hand underneath. Well, before I go any further, I want to see this little white piece here. That's called a nut because they used to make them out of nut. Some sort of inedible nut. They would carve out this little piece for guitars. And that's called a bridge bone because they actually carved it out of bone. I've taken strings off guitars and these little nuts have just fallen right off. It's because they're made of plastic and all they are is glued in there. So if they do fall off on you, don't panic, don't freak out. All it is it needs a dab of glue. You can use wood glue. I like crazy glue. Actually, a couple drops of crazy glue, put that on there, wait 5 minutes, and I can string the guitar. It's done. So if that happens to you, don't panic, don't freak out. It's really not a big deal. Okay, so I'm to this point. I got the width of my hand underneath the string, and it's all keeping the tension on it. I give it a good little twist to lock it in place. With my trusty string winder, I'm going to go over the top of this excess. So here's my excess. I want that underneath the first time around. When I go around the next time, I'm going to come around to where that string is going through again. I want to go underneath it. And what that does is it pinches the excess between the over and the under wrap. so it can't slide. Nice even wrap all the way down until your string tightens up. Now, you can trim these all off when you get to the end. Give your peg another little push to make sure that this end, give it another push. Just make sure it's seated in there, give it a tug. Make sure it's not going to pop out on you next time you tune your guitar and go flying across the room. I sell a lot of pegs that way. People coming in going, I just never found it again. My shop has eaten hundreds of them. So, okay, my next fancy one is the red end. So that's my A string. I'm gonna do the same thing. Seat it real good at this end. So put my string in, put my peg in, give it a good tug so it can't possibly pull out. And back to this end. Same thing from the inside out. With the width of my hand, like so, and kink it. Never kink it and then trim it. Wait till you're done. First time, I keep that excess underneath and I wrap over top. Next time, I don't know if you can get in close to that. Next time, I wrap underneath. So I don't overlap. You can almost kind of see it on this one if I pull it around a little bit. If I get right up close, maybe you can see that. Whoa. So you can see how I went once over and the rest underneath. And that's what holds it, locks it in place. At this point, it's just continuing on until you do them all. Without a string winder, yeah, it takes a little longer. My next one's the black end. Make sure that I'm facing the right direction. Good hard tug. Nope, and I almost went the wrong way. From the inside to the outside. Wait till you're sure you have enough before you kink it. Over. Oop, I lost it. Over then under. If you're just kind of holding it down to the headstock with your thumb, it should wrap at a nice steady pace and stay all even down. How fast did I do this at the Weldon studio that day, Maureen?
Under 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And that was from like having strings.
What's that?
That like it had the old strings on it, so you still had to cut them off and remove them. You had to restring it, and then you had to get it in tune.
Yeah. Yeah, I still don't think I was as fast as the guy in Nashville, but
I disagree.
I don't know. If I practiced a little bit, I'd have to wear my glasses though, so I can see the holes here.
Okay, guys, later this week or maybe next week, we'll go live and we'll time him. We'll go live on Facebook or something and see how fast he could do it. Yeah, Deb says thumbs up. Let's do it. So, all right. Challenge, Jack Mitchell.
All right. Well, he did an American telly. I don't have one of those anymore. I sold mine. One of my regrets.
Would a Strat take the longest?
A Strat would take longer than a telly, yeah. They were, just for anybody who's watch this. You want to know what we're talking about? Is when we went to the NAMM show in Nashville, Diodario actually had a setup, and they had an American telly, beautiful pale blue American telly, and they were timing people. You had to take the old strings off, put the new strings on, tune it, trim off the excess in as fast as you could. And the guy that did it was about 4 minutes and 40 seconds. So I didn't know if I could beat him or not, and I didn't even try. I went back the next day and I forgot. So I wanted to do it and I missed it. So if I'm ever there again, I'll try it. But the 4 minutes, 40 seconds was for a telly. I did an acoustic in just under 5, I think. So
I have a video of it.
Yeah, I don't know if I can do it or not.
Well, we're going to find out.
I've changed a lot of strings over the years.
We'll find out live on Facebook next week. Adrian wants to know what... I don't know what that word is. How would you do nygut strings? I don't know what that means.
Oh, nylon.
Oh, nylon, thank you. On classical or ukulele.
Yeah. With nylon strings, there's a special tie that you do at the bridge end. Now, I don't have a classical here. But it's something that I could do at a later date. I would love to show people the tricks on a Bigsby nylon string, or even if you have a Floyd Rose, how to lock them in, which I know Chloe has a Floyd Rose and Gavin has a Floyd Rose on their guitars. David just built one with Floyd Rose. So these are some other ones that I'd like to do. A Bigsby's kind of a tricky one as well. If you play a Gretsch, a lot of the Gretches have Bigsby tremolos on them, and they are a pain in the butt. A real quick, easy thing with that is get a pair of needle nose, put it through, give it a little twist, and then lock it with a capo on the other end so it can't fall out. Max actually taught me that trick because his Gretsch has a Bigsby. So there's a lot of other guitars that I could get into. Kaler and Floyd Rose are totally different. Nylon strings, you have to tie them on. So something I can touch on at a later time. If you're stuck and you need to get it changed, I can even do a private meeting with you and maybe do 1 or 2 just to show you how to do it. So if you're stuck, I will help you out. I'll just have to figure out when I can do that. I'll have to get a classical home so I can show you. But I know I got a couple at the store that need strings anyway. So it's at the bridge end is the tricky part. They don't have a ball end like these have the ball end on them. Nylon strings don't have that. And I'll finish this one up and I'll kind of see if I can show you a little bit on one of these old broken ones that I cut off of how it works. I just want to finish up this job here.
What a ukulele isn't the same as a classical though.
I think you can do ukulele a couple different ways. To be in all honesty, how I've seen most people do them is feed the string through and tie a double knot in it to give it a ball so it can't slide out. I don't think that's proper, but it's a quick, easy fix because a double knot won't slide through the hole. And at the other end, you just feed it through, same as you would a guitar, same as I'm doing with this one. And tune it up. The thing about nylon strings, you got to remember is they will stretch for a week. And you'll tune it, then you'll tune it, and you'll tune it, and you'll actually hear it fall. You bring it up, ba, 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 ba. It sounds like it's falling out of an airplane. It just drops as soon as you get in tune. And you got to keep twisting that stupid thing until it finally locks in place because they're nylon. They last forever, but when they break, and that's it. Okay. So we've reached the end. We got all our strings on. I have no overlaps. But I got all this mess. My spider at the top. I hate the spider at the top. I can't say enough. Do not leave the spider at the top. Trim them off. Find this pair of side cutters. Find something, a pair of pliers, anything you can find to cut them with. If you don't have anything, if you're on a gig and I forgot my side cutters. If nothing else, here's a quick little trick. I'm gonna do it on the 6th string here. Roll it, and then just keep feeding it through. Loop it, loop it, loop it. So you get this nice little loop. Isn't that cute? And the thing about that is that right there will put an eye out. I actually witnessed a bass player get one of those in the eye, middle of a set, and their show was over. So you do not want these spiders floating around. They don't care what they go into, and they hurt. So trim those off. Leave yourself a good, I don't know, 1/8 of an inch, just so it can't slip. Don't trim it right tight to the machine head. Leave yourself a little bit. Be very, very careful not to actually cut through one of the other strings. And then if you got too much, you can always just take it and bend it down. A lot of people, if you got a soft case, these will chew up your gig bag really fast. So you can just twist them down so that they point towards the headstock. Try not to use your fingers or you'll put it into your finger. Just give a little twist. Okay, some acoustics have a tuner right on board. If not, I suggest get yourself one of these. If you don't have a way of getting one of those right now, you can even download an app on your phone. That is a tuning thing. They have an app for everything nowadays, so there is a tuner app. I'm gonna turn on my tuner, and without even lifting it off my bench, I tune it up. So sometimes I just clip it at the other end. I got it down there. Doesn't matter as long as it's attached to the guitar. Wow, that's pretty high there. Now, I'm extremely used to doing this, but if you're not, go very slow. Because it's real easy to get to that spot where, like there, I'm at a C, I should be at a B. So I can say, hey, I'm at a C, I'm too low, I need to go a whole octave up, and just keep twisting. And I'll pop that brand new string. So just like an electric, just like when you do an electric, you want to make sure that they're stretched in a little bit. And I suggest this every time you tune your guitar. This isn't just when you restring it and you're waiting for the strings to stretch in. Every time you tune your guitar. My favorite trick, thank you, Danny Murray. Those of you who don't know who Danny Murray is, he was just a guy in a band with me. But Danny Murray taught me this trick many, many years ago. Danny would abuse a Stratocaster worse than anybody I've ever seen and never went out of tune. And I could never figure out how he did it. Till I watched him actually tune up one day. He was tuning up his Strat. And he would hit the note and he'd bring it up into tune. At that point, he would take a hold of that string and he'd bend it and just pull on it. And what that did was seat it both in the back part here at the bridge. And he played a Strat, so it had a seat in that block in the back. But also it took up all the tension up on the machine head here. If there's any slack in that machine head, you bend that string a little bit, it will slip. So if it slips, now you're flat. So when you tune, don't tune down. Always tune up. So if you're high, bring it back down again, give it a tug, and bring it up. If you overshoot it, bring it back down, give it a tug, do it again. I do that on every string until it can't slip or won't slip. There it is, done. So again, next time I pick up that guitar, I know those strings are fresh. It's gonna slide a little bit. I'll give them all a tug and I'll make sure that they're gonna lock in on the machine heads again. So at this point, bring up some things I forgot. One of them is, I'll go back to my Strat where I started. And as I said, if you're doing a full change, the Strat's the same as the acoustic. It's got little screws on the end here. It's got this little nut here. Everything's the same, but another thing is in the back. If you have a bolt-on neck, you have 4 screws there. While the strings are off, give it a crank. Okay? Other than that, I think that's all. So, anybody got any more questions?
Nope, just if we have any guitars for sale. Which we do, and we'll be putting them all on our website and sharing them with everybody next week. We just trying to figure out what we're doing. So yeah, does anybody have any questions? And I'm sorry, Spencer, I didn't mean to privately tell you that because that probably confused you. When would you lube your nut in all of this?
If you're gonna do that, if you're running a Floyd Rose or a trem and you like to do all the dive bombs and craziness, whenever you change your strings, yeah, you can use all kinds of stuff in there. A lot of people like graphite, and difference, it's not pencil lead, it's actual graphite. You want to actually go out and find graphite. You can order it from some of the different sites, Stuart McDonald and places like that will sell you graphite. And you just put that in there so that the string doesn't bind. And what Adriana's talking about is up at the headstock here, right in this little section here. That's the nut, like I said. And a lot of guys will lay graphite in there so the string can slide in and out of there if you're using a whammy bar. If you got a locking nut, like a Floyd Rose or whatever, you don't have to worry about any of that. But if you want to try and use a standard trem, then put a little bit of graphite in there, works really, really well. You can also use Vaseline. A lot of guys use Vaseline, or there's all kinds of different lubes that they have out there just for that particular job. Most of the guys I played with use Vaseline or graphite, so that's the only reason I suggest those two. But I would do it every time you change your strings, or just keep an eye on it. If you start hearing that little ping, that little noise, just loosen the strings off. Again, Q-tip, whatever, a little bit in there, put the string back in, tune it back up. You don't have to do it just when you change your strings. You can do it anytime. If it dries up and you start hearing that noise or it starts binding, then do it again. Usually, you probably only have to do it maybe once a month. That's about it. So, and that's the way I would do it. I don't actually use a trem. I take my bar off and throw it under my bench because I don't use them. So. Anything else?
I don't have anything. Anybody else have any questions? Nope. You were pretty thorough, Jack.
I tried to be. I could explain a classical rap, but I don't have a classical to show you on. So what I could do is just kind of watch my hands here. What happens is this goes down through the hole in the classical. It comes up and over and then just wraps around. Yeah, it's hard to do with our steel string. Just wraps around a couple times, like so. So it ends up just looking like that, tied up in a knot, and then you pull it tight, which these don't pull tight because they're steel, but you pull it tight, just like tying a knot in it. And you end up with something that looks kind of like that, like a lasso wrapped over top of each other. And you just pull it up tight over the bridge. Up at the other end, I like to go through and do the same thing, do like a little tie in the string so that it can't slip and slide. And when you're tightening it up, I use a drill because it takes so long to tighten up classical strings. I actually have a drill attachment. I don't think any of these do, no. And I put it right on my drill and I hold the drill and it goes boom. I stop and it goes boom. And just keep going until it starts to lock in place, and then I finally tune it up. I'll tune that thing, I'll walk away, I'll come back, I'll tune it again, I'll walk away, and that's how I do it. So anything else somebody wants to know?
I don't have any other questions.
Okay.
If you guys give it a shot and do it at home, take a picture of it and send it to us because we want to see. That would be awesome.
And if you run into trouble, send us an email.
Yeah.
I'll try and talk you through it. I would love to do, like I said, I'd love to do a whole classical thing. Classicals are weird. I don't know how many people actually play one. Bigsby's or our students or anything like that. But if you have one, I mean, I'd love to do that. Bigsby's, like I said, Floyd Rose, Kahlers, all the floating trims, they're extremely tricky as well. There's tricks to all of these. I figured I'd just start with the ones that I had kicking around the house and the easy ones. So other than that, nobody's got any questions. I'm all good then.
All right. Well, thanks guys so much. We're don't forget next Thursday we have the Stage Fright and the Rice Krispies webinar. You'll have to come by and find out what that's all about. It's Annie, so go figure. But every Thursday, 6 o'clock, we'll have a webinar coming up. So keep an eye out for those. And if you have any problems with restringing your guitar, just shoot us a message and I will make Jack help you.
That's right.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, guys.
Good luck.
Good luck.